Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, as you can see by the title, I'm going to give you, or I'm going to break down some of the Zimbabwean cultural concepts or beliefs or customs, traditions or habits that make life better for the Zimbabwean people. These are things that enrich the lives of the Zimbabwean people and also the lives of other people as well who visit Zimbabwe. And it is my hope that by the end of this video, you'll have a better understanding of the Zimbabwean culture and an appreciation of the culture. And also, quite quickly, before I get into the points that I have for you, I just want to encourage you to like this video and leave your comment. It helps my channel grow and it keeps me motivated as well. Now then, the first thing that enriches the Zimbabwean culture, or that I like about the Zimbabwean culture, is to do with our ancestry, our origin. Now, every original Zimbabwean has got a totem. Now, a totem represents your origin, represents your bloodline, your ancestry. It helps you keep track of your identity. And these totems are usually represented by animals. Now, if you ask me what my totem is Sokoafuanaka. That's my totem. And the animal that represents my totem, my original totem, is monkey. That's my totem. So I am a monkey. I am called Sokoafuanaka, and other people call me Manube. And usually what that means is if someone is greeting me and they want to show respect and appreciation of me, then they will greet me by my totem instead of using my name, Bertha, to say, oh, hi, how are you, Bertha? If they want to show deep respect, the ultimate respect is for them to greet me by my totem. They will say, oh, hello, Manube, oh, hello, Soko, things like that. So that's respect. That's how we identify each other in Zimbabwe. The other animals that represent totems in Zimbabwe are zebra, buffalo, elephant, all types of animals. So depending on which part of Zimbabwe you come from, your origin, depending on who your ancestors are, that is what your totem is. You are given that totem. And this is also important in that it prevents incest, because you don't want to marry somebody you are related to. There's this thing that if you want to get married, if you meet a man, if you meet a woman who is of marrying age, before you even take things further, you have to find out what their totem is. Because if you've got the same totem, if you share the same totem, suppose I meet a man and they tell me that, oh, their totem is also Soko, or their totem is monkey. Then what that means in our culture is I can't get married to that man because we are related. We come or we belong to the same bloodline. We belong to the same ancestry. So we are family, even though we are distant, but the bloodline is still the same. The ancestry is still the same. So if we get married, we are committing a cultural sin. We can't get married in our culture. And there are times when you can marry somebody with whom you share the same totem. If you are like distant relatives, if you only share the same totem, but you are kind of distant relatives, you can get married, but they have to perform some kind of ritual. Something has to happen first. Culturally, they have to perform some kind of traditional ceremony in order for that to happen. But obviously, if you're close relatives, you can't intermarry. So this is something that I like about the Zimbabwean culture, is the preservation of that identity, that ancestry. It makes you proud to know who you are. It gives you that sense of belonging, that sense of pride, that sense of identity. So that's the first thing. The second tradition or the second cultural concept that I like about Zimbabwe is storytelling. I mentioned about the ancestors, our ancestry, our bloodline. So how you come to know about this bloodline, about what is expected in the culture, about what kind of things that you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. Those things are passed down through storytelling. I remember when I was growing up in Zimbabwe, during every school holiday, my father would take us kumusha, to the village. That's another thing. I'm going to come to the village bit in a minute. So my father would take us to the village to see our uncles, my grandmother, my grandfather. So every evening after our chores, after eating, we would sit by the fireplace, and my grandmother or my grandfather would tell us stories about our ancestors. They would tell us folklores. They would tell us things about our culture, things that were important, and they will emphasize certain things to us. So that's the bit that I like about the Zimbabwean culture. It's the storytelling, because things are passed down from one generation to the next through storytelling. And it is through those stories that we preserve our culture, that we get to know our culture a little bit better. It is through storytelling that we get to know what is expected of us, things that we can do, things we can't do, as far as our culture, our traditions is concerned. So I like that bit about the Zimbabwean culture. And of course, some of the stories are folklore, they are exaggerated, they are fiction, but they are told for a reason. They are told for a purpose. And that purpose is to educate. And the other thing as well that I like about the Zimbabwean culture, or the things that enriches Zimbabweans or the culture, is kind of a continuation of what I've just said, is almost everyone, if not everyone in Zimbabwe, has got two homes. What I mean is, if you live in the city, like if you live in Harare, or in my case, I grew up in Chinhoyi, a small town. If you live in town, or if you've got a home in the city, you need to have, or you're expected to have, another home in the village, in your rural area. If you don't have a home in the rural area, it means you are lost. You don't know your roots. That's just the Zimbabwean way. This is because in Zimbabwe, we emphasize that bloodline I was talking about. We emphasize our ancestry. And, in the olden days, our ancestors, they didn't live in the city before colonization. There was no, cities like houses the way they're built these days. We had mud houses, houses that were made of, thatched roofs and stuff. Because of colonization, there have been a lot of changes when it comes to where people live, the movement. People started moving to the cities, and houses were built in a certain way. People moved to and fro in the cities and towns. People were displaced, things like that. But every Zimbabwean have got their original home in the rural areas, where their ancestors came from, where their ancestors originated from. So if you're a Zimbabwean, if you don't have that rural home, or if you don't know where you come from, or you don't know where your roots are, you are said to be lost. So that is an important aspect of the Zimbabwean culture. Every Zimbabwean, or almost every Zimbabwean, I'm saying almost because there are some people who have chosen to live in the rural areas and they don't have another home in the city or in the towns. So they only have one home in the rural areas, and those are fine. They are not judged in any way because they have remained in their original home. But if you've got a town home, or if you have got a home in the city and you don't know where your rural home is, or you don't have any connection to your rural home, then you're said to be lost. People kind of look down on you, so you need to have that rural home, or at least you need to have some kind of connection with your rural home. You don't necessarily have to live there on a permanent basis, but you just need to know where your roots are. So this is another important aspect about the Zimbabwean culture. The next aspect of the Zimbabwean culture that I love, or that makes things better for the Zimbabwean people, is how people are raised, or how people are expected to raise their children. It's to do with their upbringing, basically. We are raised to be respectful, especially to our elders. If an elder person, or if an older person is speaking to you, if they're reprimanding you, or whatever interaction is going on, you are not expected, or you can't answer back to them. You only answer back when it's necessary, when it's respectful. We are taught tsika, being polite, being respectful, especially to our elders. This is why Zimbabweans, when we're talking to somebody who's older than us, or when we're talking to somebody who's in a position of authority, especially if they are reprimanding us, we don't look them in the eye. We don't look our elders in the eye. And I know this is different from the English culture. The English culture is the opposite. But in the Zimbabwean culture, it's the opposite. If an older person is talking to you, especially if they are reprimanding you, then you're supposed to show your respect by not looking them in the eye. You're supposed to look down, or sideways, in a respectful way. There is a kind of disposition that is expected. You can't stare them in the eye like that. It shows rudeness in the Zimbabwean culture. It's an act of defiance. This is another challenge that I found when I came to England, that I was expected to look people in the eye. And it took me a while to get used to that. But when I go back home, I have to remember as well that the opposite is true. And that's not to say that you can't look them in the eye when they're talking to you. You can look them in the eye, but there is a way of doing it. The Zimbabwean way, you do it intermittently, and you do it in a respectful way, the Zimbabwean way, and kind of, like this, just to show that, okay, I'm respecting you and I hear what you're saying, just to show you acknowledge what they're saying. So there is an art to it, and if you're Zimbabwe, only Zimbabweans know how to do it. Another thing about the Zimbabwean culture that enriches its people is to do with the rituals and the ceremonies. And some of these ceremonies relate to weddings, and some of these ceremonies relate to funerals. I always say that if I'm ever going to remarry, it doesn't matter where my husband comes from. There are certain things that I feel or that I would want him to honor when it comes to my Zimbabwean culture and tradition. For me to feel like a wife, like I'm properly married to him, because it's ingrained in me, those rituals and traditions. For example, in the Zimbabwean culture, I think I have to do a separate video because this might be too long for me to explain. But what I'm talking about is there are certain traditional expectations that have to be met according to the Zimbabwean culture during a marriage ceremony. And those traditions serve a few purposes. They bring people together. They're just kind of like a token. Most of you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about roora. Of course, there is debate when it comes to roora or lobola, because some people are complaining that there are people who are taking advantage of this ceremony or this ritual. This is when the husband or the husband-to-be goes to pay a token or bride price to the woman's parents. Unfortunately, this lobola ritual is now being abused by some. They now see it as a way of swindling the husband or the husband-to-be. They're now seeing it as a way to extort, some money from their husband. And that's not the purpose of lobola. The purpose of lobola is just to acknowledge each other. It's supposed to be a token. It's not supposed to be a way of the woman's family to get rich through the husband. That's not what it's about. So the people who are misusing this ritual are the ones who are ruining things. But for me, this is an important aspect of the Zimbabwean culture. And I feel that this ritual or this culture, this custom or this tradition should be preserved, because that's what makes us who we are as Zimbabweans. It's an important part of our culture. It's an important part of our tradition. So really, if there are any changes to be made, those changes should be made to preserve the ritual in the manner that it was intended from the beginning. So as I said, there is a whole lot to say about that. I may have to do a separate video because there's a lot to talk about when it comes to rituals and ceremonies. And the last thing that I like about the Zimbabwean culture, or that makes life a little bit easier for the Zimbabwean people, or that enriches the Zimbabwean people, is the idea of the extended family. This one is a major one. In Zimbabwe, for instance, if you get married, you don't just marry your husband. That's not how things go. When you marry into a family, it means you now belong to that family. Everyone in that family is now your family. You are embraced into that family. That family now belongs to you, and you belong to that family. So whatever you do, any decisions that you make, they are bound to affect that family, the other members of that family. So you don't think in terms of, oh, my children, my husband. You don't think in terms of that. You think in terms of the extended family. You don't do things on an individual basis, especially when you are making big decisions. You have to consider other people in that family. That's how things work in Zimbabwe. There's emphasis on the extended family. And what I love about that is when there are problems in the family, or when there's something that needs to be done, or if there's a need in that family, the family comes together. The family rallies together and helps each other out. For instance, if I've got a young child, or if I've got young children and I need childcare, I don't need to worry about going to register my child with a childminder or something like that. This is something that doesn't even come into the conversation in Zimbabwe, because there's always somebody to look after your child. Unless you want your child to go to that institution to learn, to start learning, then that's a different matter. But in terms of childcare, you always have someone to take care of your child. That's something that you never have to worry about, because there is that emphasis on the extended family. Everyone looks out for each other. In Zimbabwe, it takes a village to raise a child. You can't say, oh, this is my child, these are my rules. You can't say anything. If you see my child misbehaving, I'm the only one who's supposed to discipline that child. No, in Zimbabwe, it doesn't work like that. The child belongs to the village. The child belongs to the family. The child belongs to everyone. Everyone looks out for each other. Now, I often hear people say, oh, Zimbabweans are not united. That's a different kind of situation. That's a different scenario. Everywhere you go, there will always be those squabbles. There's always be those situations. But the Zimbabwean culture, what's rooted in the Zimbabwean culture is that community, the spirit of the community, the spirit of the extended family. That is rooted in the Zimbabwean culture. There is emphasis on the extended family. And this makes life easy as well. if one person has got a problem that needs solving, everyone comes together. The elders, the tetes, the sekurus, they come together, they put their heads together, and they try to figure out how to solve a problem. If you are married and you've got a problem with your husband, instead of hiring a lawyer or going to see a counselor, in Zimbabwe, we have people within the family who take care of such things. You go to your aunt, you go to your uncle, you go to the elders who make sure that that family, that unity, that marriage is well preserved. And unfortunately, because of modernization, things are changing. The family is no longer as secure, is no longer as strong as it used to be in the olden days. Things are kind of changing. Some of the cultures and traditions are being diluted because now people are moving, we are traveling all over the world, and people are bringing in new ways of doing things. So the things are kind of getting diluted, and some people are moving away from the traditional ways of doing things. For example, some people no longer believe in the extended family. They prefer to have their own nuclear family. They like to stick to themselves, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I believe that the extended family has got a lot of advantages in that if you've got a problem, people come together and they help each other out. And before I finish, there's another Zimbabwean concept that is important, or that is ingrained in the Zimbabwean people, is that of education. Zimbabweans are raised to value education. From when we are young, it is hammered into us that education is important, that education is the one thing that someone cannot take away from us. Once you've got your qualifications, once you've got your education, then no one can take that away from you. And wherever you go, you can always use that education. So these are the Zimbabwean cultural concepts, beliefs, and customs and habits that I had for you in this video. I hope you found them insightful. I hope you've learned something about the Zimbabwean people. I hope you now have a better understanding of the Zimbabwean people and its cultures, its customs, its traditions. As I say, I can't possibly cover everything in this one video. I may have to break this concept down so that you can better understand Zimbabweans and their culture, and how these customs and traditions enrich the Zimbabwean people. Zimbabwean culture is rich and it's unique to its people. So, as always, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. If you want more content like this and haven't subscribed, then consider subscribing. Hit the notification bell so you may be notified whenever I post a video. Also, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. As I said before, it helps with the algorithm and it keeps me motivated to bring you content. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.